Welcome to March edition of Casita Coalition's Small Housing Workbench webinar series. I'm Catherine Peoples, Casita Coalition board member and CEO of HPP Cares. Casita Coalition is a cross-sector, statewide nonprofit working to remove barriers to smaller, more affordable, and sustainable homes. Our founders helped co-write California's first ADU laws that launched this movement. And each year, we're involved in continuing work of refining and clarifying ADU laws to further improve implementation. The feedback of our members is incredibly important. They let us know what issues and obstacles there are facing on daily basis as they work to get ADU projects permitted and constructed, which in turn share with legislators and housing policy leaders. As we slowly chip away at the first and second generation obstacles and find solutions that make it easier and faster to get small homes built. We'd like to thank our major sponsors who help support this work in all of our educational programs: Wells Fargo, the San Francisco Foundation, and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, as well as AARP California, the law offices of Alan Mackin, and the law offices of Ruben, Junius, and Rose, and our most recent sponsor and premier member, ADU Makers. Our presenters for today are Casita Coalition's board members, Louis Mirante of the Bay Area Council, and Jared Basler, Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for the Casita Coalition. Please look in the chat for more information on Louis and Jared. Louis, it's over to you.
Hey, sorry. Hello, everyone. My name's Louis Mirante. I'm with the Bay Area Council. Excited today to talk with you all about what's going on in ADU policy in the legislature. Let me just get my slides here ready to go.
Lou's always working, sending out emails while doing the intro.
Me.
I caught you.
Okay, here we go. And then I had a problem with the slides, but now we got them up.
All right.
And I'm happy to be joined today by Jared Basler, our policy director for the Casita Coalition. Jared, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, been with Casita for the last few years. First I was a board member and came on as a strategic initiatives last year and just took over. Celeste came on board as executive director. I took on the policy director role as well. So happy to be here.
Great. Thanks, Jared. We are going to talk today about where we are in the ADU policy world in California and where we're going in our legislation this year. Jared works with our members on a day-to-day basis, both in terms of helping them access their rights under ADU law, but also in collecting their best ideas. Jared also has many years of practice in this space, is a great resource for you all to be talking to. And then I am a lobbyist, have been a lobbyist in Sacramento for about 5 years, and worked with many of the folks on the call to pass the current iteration of California ADU law over that time period. And it's been a real success. I mean, I just love grounding these types of conversations in the fact that ADU law has created a ginormous affordable housing industry in California without a dime. Well, actually, with a few dimes of subsidy now. That's a separate conversation we'll talk about a little bit later. Largely without subsidy, going from less than 1,000 homes, less than 1,000 ADUs per year to about 20,000. So really exciting. So I'm going to hand it over to Jared to talk a little bit about what those laws are and where we are today.
Yeah, so first we're going to be going through kind of the new rules that went into effect January 1st of this year. And then we'll be getting into the legislation that's in the legislature this year. But I will say, Louis, this is one of those years where, well, both last year and this year, we didn't really expect there to be a lot of, changes to ADU law. We keep hearing that people legislator tired of. Are we good? We're good, Louis? All right.
You have it's a little choppy on your side, but we'll make it.
All right. Sorry, the Cox guy's outside. He told me that I wouldn't have any issues, but
yeah, no, I mean our enemies, Jared, are clearly at your house sabotaging your internet so that this doesn't
it's those
succeed.
utilities. Yep.
Exactly. Dang.
But yeah, so I'm always surprised by how much ADU legislation gets passed every year, and so we are at that place though where a lot of the changes are responding to these bad actors problems that are not necessarily happening everywhere. So a great example of this is what's on the slide right now with garage conversions. I think this came out of LA where they're required to do a demo permit before they were able to do their ADU permit, just effectively postponing and lengthening the process. So really a lot of legislation like this that came through this last year is responding to specific circumstances in cities. So they've now aided it so that demits are reviewed and issued at the same time, and that the written notice requirements are out of the way, except in certain historic districts. You can go to the next one. Yeah. So, and then on permit processing kind of things, I think this was something where we all know that 60 days isn't happening. We would love to apply that standard that says that it's deemed approved. But, in reality, we have to work with our building department. Making enemy of them, it just creates more issues. But one of the things that happened this last year that I thought was a really great add-in was being able to include utilities and in that definition of a permitting agency, so that we now have more. I don't think the utilities will ever have the kind of oversight that they need, especially in ADUs, but it was certainly nice to see them lumped in as someone that entity that now has to meet those 60-day requirements.
Jared, I want to emphasize too, not to do too much self-boosterizing.
Right. I was just going to set you up for that.
Oh, no. No. You're too kind. But I will say these are obviously helpful changes, but they're also changes that came from our members. So for example, let's see if I can go back a slide. I just want to emphasize this one. This no written notices thing was being abused in Berkeley, where it was pretty clear the planning department just wanted to incite the neighbors against these ADU projects, and that was kind of unfair. So our members flagged this for us. Jared and I and a broader coalition of folks worked together to make sure the law changed so that they couldn't do that. Same thing with this law here. We worked with one of the Casita Coalition's members who, wasn't able to access their rights under the 60-day rule and at least just wanted to get full comments back. And so we made that happen working with an assembly member out of Orange County. So,
yeah. And really quick, just before we go on, I see there's a lot of stuff kind of happening in the chat. If you do have specific questions for Louis or I, Q&A, that way we can log those a little bit better, and we'll get to those at the end. So,
and then maybe we can put or two. It'd be great to just remind folks that Casita Coalition members have access to a repository of Q&As that HCD has answered, the Department of Housing and Community Development has answered. We have a searchable database that I find to be helpful in helping me understand how to implement these laws and where they might need to change. So not to say we can't answer your question today, but you also just want to remind you that members have access to that resource on an ongoing basis. So maybe we'll go to the next slide, Jared.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like I was saying before, a lot of these are responding to specific circumstances in specific cities our members have brought to us. One thing here that I think is really important is this whole issue around occupancy classification. And this comes up anytime you have a duplex that you're adding an ADU to. So if you have duplex over garages, you're converting those garages to an ADU. Cities to reclassify that from R3 to R2, and then that has a ton of additional requirements that comes along with it. So one of the big changes that I thought was great this year was that is no longer able to happen under existing or under the current law. So it should help things like both processing timelines, because typically, when you do have occupancy change, then you're going over to a different type of processing within the city. So it's definitely something that will help.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of gets to something that we talk about more generally in the housing policy space too, where there's a lot of concern around just construction costs out there in the housing space. And I think that this particular sort of R2 to R3 issue was a great way of addressing construction costs, which policymakers often feel are not under their control. But if we're changing the construction type to require these buildings be over-engineered and overbuilt to have twice as many nails as they would have otherwise, that's absolutely driving construction costs. It doesn't affect the per nail price, sure, but it definitely affects the construction cost to be requiring these buildings to be built in an over-engineered way. So again, just like trying to address this problem from all the different angles.
Yeah. The other thing, I think this is still something that we run into moving to the front setback issue, is that, the idea is that cities were requiring that ADUs be in the rear 50% of the lot. And where you have the unduly constrained is something that I think we will need to have some better definition on in the future, because that's something that, I've already seen cities that are starting to say, well, you can, build it in a crazy shape and, 8 feet wide and, wrap around the existing building in order to get it in the, in the rear 50%. That's not unduly constraining you. So it's definitely something that still needs work, but we're continuing to see those barriers. State law changes. We have a new opportunity to learn how cities will find the loopholes. So, and then really quick on JADUs, I think this was something where a lot of practitioners don't realize that the JADU can share bathing facilities with the primary, and because of that, we want to make sure that there's access to that bathroom. So it's the other reason why you have owner occupancy on a JADU, is because you want to make sure that each other out of bathing facilities. So it's definitely something that needed to be clarified in the law, but it seemed obvious, but people will do some crazy things. So you can go on to the next one.
Cool.
And then I think one thing that has slowed down a lot of people in ADU development, and just homeowners in general, having unpermitted work on their existing primary, can in previous years could essentially kill the opportunity for a homeowner to be able to build a new detached ADU. So being able to remove that condition of approval for the ADU and have code violations be treated separately, not as a condition of getting your ADU, is definitely something that needed to happen, probably needed to happen earlier, but it's we can make incremental changes, incremental improvements to get these, get it perfect the first time. And I think local agencies would still find ways to get around it, even if you wrote it perfect the first time around. So we can keep going.
Okay.
There's a lot of kind of and you guys will have access to these slides after, but in our HCD index is in the process of being updated, so we'll have additional resources for you. I want to make sure that we can get to the new stuff as well.
Great.
And then, I think one of the things that always drives us crazy, Louis, is height. I think it's one of those things that is fought over tooth and nail, and is so difficult to get everyone on the same page. So we keep seeing, again, incremental improvements. We saw, this year we got 18 feet near transit, 18 feet where, you have an existing multifamily, multi-story building. Also got allowances for require you to match roof pitch of the primary home, or even if you're wanting to do that from a design perspective, get an extra 2 feet so you can get up to 20 feet. And then the one thing that I thought was important, we wanted to do more here, but providing an opportunity to essentially match the existing height limit for the primary for attached ADUs, because at the end of the day, they simply look from the street as a 2-story addition to a home. So providing that as a height, I think we're going to continue to see movement here, but it may not be this year. So I think it's something that we need the legislature to step up in a way of saying you can do 2-story ADUs or you can't. Because I think one of the things that we always struggle with here is every city measures height differently.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's something that maybe as we expand our legislative advocacy portfolio, Jared, we might want to just set, this is probably not something we would do specific to ADUs, but the legislature could totally instruct local governments as to how they're supposed to measure key variables like height. And I think that standardization across the state might be good just in general, but could be really helpful for the ADU industry. So
good luck with local control people getting that past them.
Well, there's a great, I was really enjoying watching this clip this morning. I think the conversation around local control is thankfully changing. There's a great clip I saw this morning. Montana is debating whether to allow duplexes in its urban areas. Lots of states are actually looking at ordinances that are influenced by California's progress on ADUs. And this Montana state senator, I can't remember his name, something very hard to pronounce in Polish, what stood up and someone asked him, well, what about community character, Senator? And he kind of thinks about it for a second, and he just goes, honestly, I don't care. And then goes on this great speech about how there are people in his district in Billings that are homeless in negative 30-degree weather, and just very powerful speech. So I think a lot of people are kind of starting to feel that I don't really care attitude when it comes to.
Well, I think
solutions.
that, our cities are always constantly evolving. We try to, we hear these arguments about community character and, keeping single family neighborhoods to retain the character. It's only the character that you remember from when you bought it. Because if we really wanted to retain that community character, let's go all the way back.
Yeah, sure.
And I mean, that's obviously not something that we want to do,
Right.
but it's every homeowner is only going any character they bought it.
Right.
And so, your neighbors put up additions, your neighborhood's changed since you moved in. So, it's going to continue to change. And,
Yes.
we have to provide the housing. We need to, we need the housing. So.
Next slide, Jared.
Yeah, this is on to you, I think.
Oh, exciting. So this kind of then gets into and we'll have like a formal Q&A period at the end for sure. And any, questions that kind of come in, I got the Q&A and the webinar chat here open just in case there are any questions that come in that we can answer quickly. But we'll have like a Q&A period at the end where we'll just start with addressing some of these.
Yeah.
So this kind of gets into the councils. I work for the Barrie Council. I volunteer my time with the Casita Coalition. This is the coalition's top 3 ADU priorities, policy priorities, and budget priorities this year. Our vice chair.
Well, hold on. We got our case study first. So.
Oh no, I know.
Okay,
I'll get there.
Right.
I'll get there.
All right. No,
our vice chair.
I was about to say that this is a great example. Like this stuff is and why it matters to make these moves. So, go ahead, Louis.
Our vice chair had this idea. There are lots of cities and states around the country that allow people to sell ADUs. The Casita Coalition did a deep dive into how we can be intentional about advancing race equity in California and allowing the separate conveyance of ADUs kind of came up as a really exciting opportunity way to create much more affordable home ownership products than the market currently creates. So that got us thinking, that got us looking into stuff. And one of the exciting jurisdictions that's doing this right now is Seattle, Washington. So Seattle has enacted ADU reforms. Something like 30 to 40% of the city's pipeline right now is an ADU because the rules they adopted were rather quite permissive. Here it is. 70% of the new homes built in 2022 had at least one ADU. It's incredible. That both demonstrates that there's a real appetite. The market's really strong for ADU construction, and that when we make the rules more permissive, folks will jump at those opportunities. It's also really exciting to see that these ADUs, when they are sold, are typically much more affordable than commensurate products, single family homes on the market. This is both, I think, a real opportunity for us to be learning from folks who do this better than us, advancing race equity in terms of who's allowed to build equity through homeownership. And I think this is an untapped piece of the market. This just isn't something we've been doing in California, and I think this will accelerate demand for ADU construction because it's a new financing model. It's a new opportunity. It's a new thing that will bring people to the ADU construction industry in interesting ways.
Yeah.
Jerry, did you? No. Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm good.
Cool. So this brings us to our top 3 priorities for this year. Our executive director Celeste has been doing a yeoman's job in getting out draft support letters for these things. If you take action with Casita Coalition this year, I really hope that you'll take action on at least these 3 priorities with us. Because I think they're some of the most important reforms in the legislature right now. Maybe I should just situate us in the legislature. The legislature kicked off in January. We're still in the first policy committee phase for most of these bills. And the first house, we have a bicameral legislature here in California. First house will wrap up in June or July for most of these things. And then through the middle of September, the second house will debate these items as well. And the governor has until October 15th to sign most of these bills. And then we start all over again next year. So it's a long process here in California. There's a lot of debate. It means when we have folks supporting, it's all that more helpful to vouch for these ideas and give them credibility. Folks really like seeing the Casita Coalition behind ADU bills because it gives them great comfort that folks like those of you on this call have reviewed the bills, have blessed it, understand it works from a practitioner standpoint. Okay, so let's get into it.
And one thing I'll
go
say,
ahead.
just
Please.
talking about the legislative process in general, being so long in California every year, it also leaves a lot of time for amendments to get in.
Yes.
Which in the case of well-crafted bills is frustrating. In the case of trying to insert something into another bill, it's helpful. But again, it's one of those things that is can be very frustrating when you have something that really well crafted and is gonna make a difference to see it be eroded throughout the year. We saw this last year with the owner occupancy issue getting stripped out, and it was just it's frustrating to have something so important that's part of a larger bill that ends up getting taken out to satisfy one angry person on the committee. So
yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more too, but I agree. So one of the I think one of the top bills that I'm working on this year is AB 1033. This bill repeals a state ban on selling ADUs. And by repealing that ban, it would allow local governments to decide how or if to allow the separate conveyance of ADUs, either through a condo map or through a parcel split process or through something else that would be governed by the existing Subdivision Map Act. This is a really exciting opportunity, especially the condoization of ADUs and the sale of those. Could, again, like I said, create a lot of really awesome opportunity. The state would not, in taking this action, require local governments to do this. And because most local ordinances simply mirror existing law today, I anticipate that a lot of local ordinances will continue their existing bans on selling them. But
and I think it's important that the way that this does it is by allowing you to utilize the existing conditions.
Yeah.
Or you can come up with your own ordinance to deal with it. So it allows for even, some of the pushback I think we've heard is that like this will force cities to redo their ordinance again.
Not necessarily the case.
Because if their current ordinance says you can't separately convey except under the conditions that are already in state law, that language is still perfectly fine. So by giving the option, it allows cities to adopt it in a way that works within their existing system. And then, that will help inform moving forward on how to more appropriately set up something statewide that might be required in, the future.
Yep. So I think I just saw a question in the chat from Kevin, so I'm just going to answer it because it's right on this. AB 1033 allows for separate sales conveyance, but it's silent on implementation. The reason it's silent on implementation is because we're leaving it entirely up to local governments to decide if they want to do this. We think a lot will decide to do this. We think folks like Oakland and Berkeley and probably the city of San Diego will jump at this opportunity. And then just like any normal condo mapping process or subdivision process, the ordinance that the local government either drafts or amends to deal with this would be governed by the Subdivision Map Act and all of its protections. And, this would be treated, as a normal condoization or subdivision.
Yeah.
So, again, exciting opportunity, especially, that'll be a good opportunity for our members to be engaged in the local communities in which they're most active in from a business angle. We try to work with local governments across the state to make sure that they have the best practices in their ADU ordinances. And so, making sure that we preserve the fee protections at all steps in the process for building ADUs, making sure that local governments are electing to do this affordable home ownership option will be a priority for us in the implementation phase. So stick with us on that, and we will want your help in terms of talking to folks and guiding us. AB 976, also from Assemblymember Ting, is of San Francisco, is a bill that will eliminate this the sunset on the owner occupancy provisions of ADU law. As folks on this call probably know, local governments used to be able to impose owner occupancy restrictions in California, thanks to a bill from Assemblymember Bloom, AB 881, that I was also the lead lobbyist for. That is no longer the case until, I believe, January 1st of 2025.
Yeah.
And those those owner occupancy restrictions were a really big barrier to housing production, especially in Portland. And they gave homeowners a lot of nervousness that they were signing this document about where they were going to live and who was going to live and where. And it made them concerned about if they'd be able to sell the house, if there would be buyers for it, that kind of thing. And it really chilled housing production in a lot of these communities, which was local government's intended goal. Local governments, I think, are just extremely hostile to production of housing. They see ADUs as a very successful method for producing housing, and they're constantly trying to defeat the success of ADU law. It's an extremely shameful, unbelievably embarrassing position for them to have in 2023, but they have it nonetheless.
Yeah, and just to be clear, there are plenty of cities that have existing ordinances that will impose owner occupancy January 1st, 2025, if nothing changes. So it's really important that we support this, because it's not just like they're all going to come to their senses and be fine with it. That there's plenty of cities that are ready to pounce.
Right. And then we're also really interested in putting a report together. Some of the reason, so as Jared mentioned earlier, we were working on a bill from Senator Wojciechowski last year that would have had this in it, that did have it in it. It was stripped out by one of the Senate Appropriations chairs, and Senator Portantino of Pasadena, or of La Cañada Flint Ridge. And he's just been traditionally very hostile to housing production. His stated objection to this is that he doesn't want to allow BlackRock and big investment firms to build ADUs. There's no evidence that they do. And there's every evidence that they actually try to avoid markets with high levels of production. For example, in their SEC filings, they explicitly state they target supply-constrained, high-demand areas with a robust job growth for where to buy homes, because they know that's where they're going to get the best return on investment for flipping them. So it's a specious concern, but if he has that concern, and to the extent that that concern can be assuaged by information, it's our responsibility to provide that information to him. So working on the owner occupancy thing, pretty simple. I'm optimistic we'll be able to get to some sort of a solution this year, but I'm not sure that this bill is going to survive the whole process. The Assembly Local Government Committee, which will review this bill, is currently composed in a way that's very hostile to housing production legislation. Four of the 8 members of the Assembly Local Government Committee are very, very big local controllers. You need 5 members to support something. So I think this is going to be a really hard uphill fight for Mr. Ting. There are trick cards we have up our sleeve that we'll consider later in the year if this does fail in Assembly Local Gov. But, you know, again, just the benefit of working with an association and lobbyists on this sort of stuff. We're going to try to get this done this year. And then folks probably know that the governor's budget proposal, which came out on January 10th this year, proposes to revert $50 million he'd committed to last year for ADU financing. This is particularly important for low and middle income homeowners who want to build an ADU. And I think from a broader perspective, it's really important that we pass these laws and everyone and anyone is able to benefit from them. Not just wealthy folks who can capitalize these, you know, without, you know, with just cash or something like that. So we're going to be working on restoring this money. Mr. Ting, our champion from the previous two bills, is also the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee, which reviews the governor's proposals. He and other Assembly members I've spoken with are very eager to not allow this money to be reverted in the way the governor is proposing to revert it. And our Senate budget chair, Senator Nancy Skinner of Berkeley, is also a very big proponent of this program and of ADUs generally and of housing production itself. So I'm optimistic that we can get at least two of the big three stools of the legs of the stool to want to keep this money. And when you can do that, that's usually a recipe for success.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed, but I'm not making any promises.
Like a true lobbyist.
Exactly. I take credit only for my victories and I blame everyone else for my failures. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, we're not going to get into too much detail on these other bills that are in progress, just because we want to have time for some Q&A. But Louis, if you want to mention, you know.
Yeah, just wanted to put them on your radar. The probably the biggest one on this list is going to be 1661 or 434, the first or the last. This Bonta bill would speed up the timelines that investor-owned utilities would have to meet in hooking up ADUs and would prevent them from requiring a second meter in many instances. Could save project proponents $10,000 to $20,000 on a lot of these things. Good idea. And
it's not necessarily going to keep, you know, projects from needing to be upgraded.
Right.
It's simply the homeowner, the applicant, the opportunity to not create separate meters when they have the existing capacity. So
right.
I think it's definitely moving in the right direction. You know, there's lots of benefits for having separate meters, but you know, there's certainly homeowners that don't want to do that, and you know, this provides them with a mechanism. So
exactly. And then I'm going to skip all the way down to this bottom one here, AB 434 from Mr. Grayson. There's a list in state law called the AB 72 list. HCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, works with the state's attorney general, or also known as the Department of Justice, on lots of issues facing California, including the enforcement of state housing laws. The folks at HCD are often the experts on these. They also have regulatory authority over ADU ordinances at the local level, so they're keenly aware of everything going on around the state on this. AB 434 would put ADU law on the AB 72 list, allowing HCD to formally refer local governments local governments to the Attorney General for enforcement action. So they coordinate on these things. It's a great accountability tool. It strengthens what the state's Department of Housing and Community Development is already doing. And something that I would love to, maybe I'll drop it in the chat later when Jared's talking, or Celeste, someone else if you can find the email address for the Department of Housing and Community Development's Housing Accountability Unit, we should just drop that in the chat. I will address questions for sure in this next period, but I've already seen some questions from folks where the local government is just doing something illegal. And when local governments are doing something illegal, even if it's just the 60 days, they're not meeting the 60 days, I encourage you to email the Department of Housing and Community Development's Housing Accountability Unit. I was one of the lead lobbyists for this proposal as well. We got $5 million, $4.3 million we got a portal, even better. Great. Yeah. I'm not up on it. Thank you, Celeste. But we got $4.3-ish million to staff up a division of the state's housing department to help project proponents and homeowners respond to local governments when local governments are doing something that the homeowner thinks to be illegal. It's just it's basically free help. It's not a lawsuit. You're not emailing them to sue them. Most of what this division does is technical assistance. And at the very least, it bumps it up the radar chain, so to speak, bumps it up the ladder at the local government, makes them just a little bit more aware that your need is pressing and they should respond to it imminently, lest they hear back from the governor himself. The governor has been victimizing Huntington Beach and other cities by tweet, and no city wants to end up at the end of one of his tweets as the bad guy. So always a good opportunity to talk to them. Someone will put the portal in the chat, but you can also find it online. We'll run through these just quickly. AB 932 requires the state to produce a report on the ongoing stakeholder conversations around that Cal HFA funding program for ADUs. Nothing huge. AB 42 from Assemblymember Ramos would just very simple bill, one line, prevent you from having to build sprinklers on something under 500 square feet. Very simple. And AB 671 would allow separate ADU sales under CLTs, something similar to what we're working on in the separate conveyance space in general. So all progress, and I think the separate conveyance bill and the homeownership or the owner occupancy rule are going to be the biggest ones for this year. But let's just start answering some Q&A.
Yeah, and I think Celeste. Yeah, Celeste is going to pop in for the Q&A. She's been taking a look and has some questions lined up for us.
Good. Oh, and there's the portal right there in the chat. So everyone should bookmark that.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, there was an old email address that a lot of professionals utilize. You at APK.gov. That email address is no longer operational, so everything needs to go through that portal. So,
yep.
Well, I also, even though I am not a project proponent most of the time, I also use that email at one point because all those people are responsive and helpful. I was actually able to get so Berkeley had this thing where they were going to ban ADU production in their high wildfire areas. Irrespective of the policy consideration of that, it is strictly speaking, from a statutory perspective, illegal for the city of Berkeley to do that. And so I emailed HCD, was kind of mad about it because Berkeley is just doing this for NIMBY reasons. That's where all the richest people in Berkeley live, including 2 of the city council members. And HCD responded to Berkeley quite forthrightly and demanded that they change their ordinance, and they did. So somebody had talked about the high wildfire thing in the chat. That's the solution there. I would talk to HCD. Your local government is just violating the law.
Okay. I would also say, just on that general topic, if you're having issues where you believe something is state law, first thing to do is to get on that portal and ask them if they have a reviewed ordinance for that city. Because at the end of the day, most cities think that they're the ones that get to decide whether or not their ordinance meets state law. I've been able to deal with issues with cities by simply just requesting that reviewed ordinance and then letting the city know that I've reached out to HCD, and HCD emails them a couple days later saying, we haven't reviewed your ordinance, and magically
Yeah, all of a sudden the city attorney gets involved, and the recalcitrant planner who just wanted to, move water for the NIMBYs is pushed aside. So that's always fun.
Because I think Jared cut out a little bit there, because if they don't have an approved ordinance, then the state law is the active guiding law. Okay, so let's take care of an easy one first.
Cool.
We had a question about how 800 square feet for the state exempt ADU is measured. Is it inside the face of the wall, or is it outside face of the wall?
Should be inside. But I don't think that's a matter that's not been decided as a matter of statute, but it should be inside. If somebody's doing outside, they're just being mean.
So, and what I'll say is every jurisdiction is going to have something called rules for calculations and measurements, where they are defining how they define height and what they, where they measure from and to. Same thing with gross floor area, all the kind of things that, are addressed in state law, but aren't defined per se.
Okay.
God, that sounds like the NIMBY's jurisdiction. Trying to count the inside of the walls as they're just unbelievable.
Well, another question that comes up on that, I don't see it in the chat today, but it's around carports and overhangs. And I think there's a lot of variety there too. Okay, and then we have a question on setbacks. Yeah. So is this the case that an 800 square foot state exempt ADU can go up to 4 feet on the front setback under the new rules? There's a jurisdiction mentioned by this viewer who says that you have to use all your other options for placement first. If it won't go anywhere else on the lot, then you're allowed to have it on the front setback as close as 4 feet.
So there's nothing in the state law that talks about a 4-foot front setback.
And everything in state law that says you cannot impose a front setback at all, period, full stop.
Yeah.
So
you're not going to get cities that are going to go along with that, being able to build on the front property line. But essentially, as a architect or designer, it's your job to try to make it work where it should go. And that gets down to kind of the definition of unduly constrained, and why I think we're going to have some continued issues with that. But the nice thing is that HCD has the power to interpret and provide the all for the state ADU law. So we have that ammo.
You can always invite your local government to simply hire better, more convincing lobbyists to change the law if they disagree with it. Implementation.
No.
Okay, and do we have a legal definition of unduly constrained? That was a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so there are a couple requests for clarification on the height question. And the first one is, does the primary home that the attached ADU is connected to, does it have to be a 2-story home in order for the allowance of 25-foot height for the ADU to be in effect?
Nope.
If it's near transit, it can be 2 stories.
Well, we're 25-foot for attached ADUs.
Oh, right. Yes, correct. Yeah. So if
it does not.
Yes.
Yeah.
What Jared said. Yeah.
So the question of whether the primary residence, whether that's multifamily or single family, whether that's 1 story or 2, is active in the detached ADU height guidance.
Correct.
So in that case, if those are 2-story or more, then you're allowed 18 feet for the detached. Correct, Jared? He's raising up a little. Yeah. Okay. And then someone's question was around the if it is attached and you're looking to get 25 feet in your attached ADU, does it matter whether the zoning, the overlying zoning for your parcel, if the height limit is lower than 25, then if that restricts you from doing a 2-story, is that still okay?
So the way the law is written is that it's 25 feet for the underlying base zoning height allowance, whichever is lower. Again, cities can be more progressive, allow more, so that's not a total, City of San Diego has a 30 limit. So you can always be more lenient. But it does not, at that point, it goes back down to, the 16 and 18 feet that's in, the two sections.
But they can't, a city couldn't say you can only build an attached ADU that's any shorter than 16 feet. That would not be legal.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Okay. And then we had a utility question. Someone's asking if the new rules around the 60-day permit completion timeline includes municipal utilities as well as other agencies.
The 60-day requirement applies to anything that could be broadly construed as a government. It does not apply to things like PG&E or SoCal. Well, SoCal Edison. No, not. It's investor owned. So if it has a .gov email address, if it's associated with your local government or whatever, that it then applies. But it's, just the only exception is the investor owned ones, because they're not included in the definition of permitting agency for the statute.
Is that where that landed? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see, what else do we have here?
So Palo Alto owning its own utility, Randy, would apply. It should.
Okay. And LADWP is
Also,
city owned.
Also
okay.
should apply.
Great. Yeah. Okay. And again, as Jared said, the first thing to do is to use the portal to check and see if your jurisdiction has an approved HCD approved ordinance, local ordinance. They used to be listed on their website. They are not anymore because it changes so often. And so the thing to do is find that out first, and then you'll know what rules are in effect.
And they're required to send that over to HCD anytime they make a change to their ADU ordinance. So just because they had one that was reviewed in 2019 doesn't mean they're compliant today.
And we are hearing that. And there's a lot of updating going on with the new 2023 laws as well. So at HCD as well, they're still working on their updates to the handbook. Okay, so definition of transit, half mile from transit, the official definition, it is walking distance. So it's not as the crow flies, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then it's to a stop. It's not to just the line, it has to be to a stop.
Correct.
Okay. And that's written in the law. You can refer to that. Okay.
Yeah, it's
other portions of government code as well. So.
Okay, great. All right, so HOAs.
Ooh, sorry, go on.
Yes, not an easy one. HCD itself is still working in this area. Do we want to try to talk about it, Jared, or maybe not? We don't have time for too many more questions.
Yeah, no, there's some statutory clarity on what's allowed in HOAs now. Yeah.
Well, we know that HOAs cannot prevent homeowners from having ADUs. Is that subdivision E, state exemption ADUs, or any ADU that's allowed under state law?
Any ADU that would be governed by the applicable local government's ADU ordinance or by state law. Yeah, so if let's say you're unincorporated Sonoma County, you might be subject to the county of Sonoma's ADU ordinance or to ADU law, either one, but you couldn't apply Napa's. Okay.
The question in the chat is whether HOAs can add additional restrictions on ADU that would change the kind of ADU, the size, location, et cetera, that you can build.
They do have some flexibility, but those standards can't be so obtuse as to completely block the ADU.
Right. And
they essentially have to act as a local agency.
Yeah.
In essence, they still have to meet the requirements of state ADU law for what they can have in their regulations.
Okay. And it has to be, therefore, it has to be objective and can't be subjective standards for HOAs as well. Okay, great. That should help a lot. All right, so there's another height question. I think those are the majority of the questions. We did
Cool.
have one about manufactured homes versus park models as ADUs. And those are two different categories, manufactured homes being allowed as primary homes and ADUs anywhere in California. But a park model is classified as an RV in only certain jurisdictions.
Oh, yeah. We've been talking, this has been something that's been bubbling up for potential reform for years now. I'm not like, I sort of am of several minds on this, and I'm just not, I don't have a good picture for what policy is totally needed here. So this is a great example of where members who are interested in this particular thing should get involved with us and tell us what we should be doing on it.
Yeah, and Celeste, you and I had a great conversation about this, about how to potentially be able to, a strategy of providing opportunities for permanent habitation in personal property as well as real property, given that we have a housing.
Right.
That's something.
Okay, I think that's about all the time we have
right now.
And I want to thank you both. We're going to throw it back to Catherine for the wrap up. But thanks so much, Louis. Thanks, Jared. Thanks for everybody who came and asked questions.
It's always fun. We always get such hard and detailed questions from this audience. People know a lot on these calls. I usually have easier audiences. So this one, I commend you on being tough.
Great. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you all again to our presenters, our participants, and our sponsors on behalf of the Casita Coalition. Our thanks to everyone who attended today. We invite our small housing professionals, community-based organizations, and homeowners to add your voice and join the conversation by becoming a member or donating to Casita Coalition at casitacoalition.org. You'll find lots of resources on our website, including guidebooks on subjects such as garage conversions, ADU refinancing, multifamily ADUs, and links to our webinar library can be found that direct you directly to our YouTube channel, and many more resources from both ADU professionals and homeowners. Join us for next month's webinar on Friday, April 28th, on small housing affordability strategies. You can keep up to date with all of our events and small housing news by joining our mailing list and becoming a member, again, at casitacoalition.org. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing all of you again next month.
Okay, if the panelists will remain in place while the guests filter out.
Louis forgot that he was supposed to stay on.
It happens. Okay.